It's very quiet around here this morning.
Well, that's because all the action's in D.C. right now.
It is. Look at
Yeah.
that. You were good with. You're quick with a
Yes.
comeback that was related to what we were talking
I
about.
am a related, relevant person.
What in the? That was impressive. I kind of, as I was saying, it's very quiet this morning. I thought that's not really a great way to start off the show, but you brought it right back. Good
Yes.
morning, everybody. I'm Clay Aiken here with Carrie Sheffield for BoldTV.
Yes.
We hope you're. We're glad you're joining us now this morning on Facebook or a Periscope or wherever you're joining us.
And always, as always, make sure to like Bold TV on Facebook so you can get our updates, you can get notifications when the show's coming on, and make sure you add your comments in the questions. We love to interact with our guests. We love to incorporate your thoughts. We got some really smart audience members that we love to highlight, so please put your comments in.
We love to throw in your questions. Actually, oftentimes, the questions you guys ask are better than the ones that we ask. So throw them in there. You
Yes.
got the discussion with this show with your comments and questions. We are merely conduits, don't you think?
Conduits. Yes.
So I've been out of town this week, out of the country. I've been in London. And I have got to be honest with you, it was sort of nice to ignore American news for a week.
So what do British people think about Trump?
You know what? I tell you what, it's absolutely fascinating. It's just in England a lot like it is in America with people who are very polarized. I expected to go to England and talk to people and find that they were all just very anti-Trump and it was the worst thing in the world. And I will say that I probably did speak to more people in London who felt that way. But I had several little black cab drivers who were big supporters of Brexit, who happen to also be supporters of Trump. I mean, I think we've heard a lot of comparisons over the past year of how the Trump phenomenon and the Brexit phenomenon were very parallel to each other. And I think that it sort of lined up that way with the people I talked to in London.
Yeah, and to clarify, the cabs themselves are black. We're not talking about.
I'm not talking about a driver who was black, although he was. But but yes, the black cabs in London, they're very, very well known.
Yes.
But yeah, it sort of lined up in that way, and I was surprised. I think a lot of people. Universally, the folks who I talked to felt that one, his rhetoric was more incendiary than they appreciate, and I think that has a lot to do.
Especially if you're proper British, that's like
Well,
way far out of decorum.
yeah, I don't talk to many proper people in my life, either here nor there. But you know, I think a part of it has to do because I talked a little bit with one driver about politics in the U.S. versus politics in the U.K. And of course, politics in the U.S. Tends to be, we already know, more vitriolic. In the U.K., it's far less vitriolic. He was telling me about a campaign in the northern part of the country several years ago, a by-election, as they call them, our midterms, I guess, where at some point during the campaign, the opposition decided to talk about a comment that the person had made several years prior, and that had been this really dirty campaign tactic. And I thought, what? That's dirty? Are you kidding me? Whew, you should be turning on our news because we will grab you in the crotch.
But you know what's interesting though is that when you actually watch their floor debates are actually really, really aggressive and sometimes nasty. But they do it in person
And don't seem to mind. Like they
but
celebrate
it's like
that.
sport. It's like a sport to them. Like I remember watching these debates with like Margaret Thatcher.
You watched
and
with
she,
her? Since you're being very good on semantics. She was with you?
After the fact, yes. I was
hanging out with
I am
Maggie
Margaret
Thatcher.
Thatcher incarnate.
You know what I think, listen, I always bring it back to this a lot, but there's very little money involved in politics in the UK. They're not allowed to spend the type of money that we're allowed to spend on politics in that country.
But the other thing they have is the parliamentary system where they have the prime minister is elected by the members of Congress, the equivalent. So
in a way, it's sort of like if
it's like a proxy.
It's almost as if though if Paul Ryan had the powers of the presidency also.
Or
Speaker of
Paul
the House.
Ryan and his team would be able to select the president versus direct or electoral college voting.
There's always benefits to you. You know, we sit here in America and we think about the other side of the pond and how it. I mean, I told you this morning. I get off the train here in New York after being in London for a week and think, oh my gosh, why can't they clean it up? We always see something better on the other side, but the truth is there are things about their system which I admire. I love the fact that on election night, they actually, this blows my mind, having run in a congressional campaign myself. On election night, if you ever watch the returns in England, all of the candidates show up together in the same room and they stand on a stage together, and then the person from that constituency, as they call it, we call them districts, but in that constituency comes up and reads the actual vote total that's been counted by hand and tells them who won right there, and they shake each other's hands and give an acceptance speech. And I think to myself, Lord, if I had to stand there and shake Renee Elmer's hand, oh, mercy. Oh.
But you know what? I actually love, I think that's
I love it.
That's a very bold idea.
It is brilliant.
Because, you know, at Bold, we're always trying to have a bipartisan, humanizing conversation. That sounds like the perfect setting to do that.
If you think about the idea, the fact that if we were forced to be in front of our opponents, or if we were put in a position where we had to actually be around them more often instead of hiding behind negative ads and hiding behind attacks.
A Twitter avatar.
Right.
Yes.
Then, you know, we might be more respectful. And yes, it kind of makes me go, ugh, to think that I would have had to, you know, stand on a stage with my opponent. But had I done that the few times that I was around her, you know, we were always very respectful towards each other. If I'd had to be around her more and I knew that I was going to have to stand up there and shake her hand later, I probably would have disliked her a little less.
It could start the healing process much more quickly because it's happening.
There's
in
an
real
idea.
time.
Can we change America this morning? Probably not.
Let's work on that. Let's change.org petition.
So what else happened while I was gone?
So while you were away, Jeff Sessions, who is the Attorney General, he, you know, there was, we have a story on Bold.Global right now about what's happening. So he testified under oath during his confirmation hearings that he had not had contact with the Russian government. And then it turns out the Washington Post reported that, yes, he had. And his defense was that this was related to my position on the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. It was Senate related. It was not campaign related. I did not meet with the Russian government to talk about the Trump campaign, which was the implication of the line of questioning. And then
was the line of questioning about specifically talking about the Trump campaign, or was because if I remember correctly, Al Franken was the senator who asked him if he had any contact with the Russian government during the campaign. And did he, I mean, admittedly, I think it was sort of a passing statement. I think Al Franken had just gotten that initial report from CNN about the, you know, the dossier, if you want to call it that. But I think that Senator at the time Sessions' response was more blanket, and no, I had not had contact with the Russian government. Is that what is causing people to be upset, or the potential that he might have perjured himself, or is it the fact that he spoke with them in the first place?
I think it's both. I think, yeah, it's like different layers, but I think the more serious charge would be the charge of perjury, which is what Nancy Pelosi is trying to say. So Nancy Pelosi has called for his resignation. Even some Republicans have said he needs to recuse himself from any investigation about Russia. They're not going so far as to say today
and he did,
resign.
yes.
And he did. So
it's interesting. It's really interesting to me, and I have to say, I don't like to think of myself as a rabble rouser and a turd stirrer, if you will. But
what do you guys think?
Well, no. And listen, I certainly will stand in the gap for things that I feel strongly about. But I try to keep from banging a drum just for the sake of hearing it. And I have said it many times that I think that, you know, Democrats have done a lot of that, a lot of sky is falling rhetoric, even though maybe it weren't. But that said, if you think about the fact that Democrats are far more out of power right now, you know, electorally than the party has been in decades.
And even since World War II, congressionally.
Right. Yeah. Very, very, very little power. Electorally, I meant certainly by elected leaders. But it's really impressive that even though the party has been as weakened as it has been in the past several months, in just a few weeks' time, not even really a full 2 weeks' time, the banging of the drums on the Democratic side has led to the resignation of Mike Flynn, has led to now Jeff Sessions recusing himself. And I got to say, that to me is impressive. For a party to be so out of power and yet still have so much influence it speaks a little bit to the efficacy of this drum banging, and it makes me wonder if that's just the way of the world in the future from now on.
Well, we're going to have a debate later on about drum banging and whether the media is helping him, which a lot of Trump supporters would say that that's part of it. But I think it also speaks to some, you know, Republican senators like John McCain, like Lindsey Graham, like Marco Rubio. They've been critics and you know, calling out, especially pulling the flag on Russia, in terms of making sure we're not having a foreign power, unduly influence. I mean, they shouldn't have any influence on our election process.
And
so I think
several
that's,
Republicans came out again. And again, I just got back, so I'm a little bit behind. Did I hear that Paul Ryan also suggested that Jeff Sessions should recuse himself, and that several Republicans beyond, and I only asked that because obviously we've heard John McCain and Lindsey Graham speak up against their party a few times.
Jason Chaffetz did, and he's prominent. I don't believe that Paul Ryan has gone that far.
We have an intern here somewhere who can look that up for us.
Fact check.
Let's
Bold
make sure
fact
we aren't
check.
giving wrong information, but I thought I'd heard that.
But, I think that we have a comment here from Rhonda Lee Deschamps. She says, it's disgraceful that our Attorney General lies, even a lie of omission. Well, I want to put a conversation here about perjury, because that's the big question. And that was what led to, Bill Clinton's impeachment, is the question of perjury. Mm-hmm. It's three components of perjury. Number one, the statement has to be false. Number two, the statement has to have some sort of material negative
getting this
impact. This is just the definition of of the legal definition of perjury according to federal code, and then it has to be false, and then it has to have some material impact on the situation at hand, and then it also has to be made with the intent to deceive. And I think that's in particular what Donald Trump has said as his defense of Jeff Sessions, is to say that, if he misspoke, it was really not meant to deceive anyone. It was a miscommunication.
But if the question is, did you have contact with the Russian government, and you did, and you say you didn't, I mean, is that the kind of thing that, I don't know. I think that, listen, it's always, everything has gray areas in it. And I would argue, and granted, we all know my bias, but I would argue that the same types of things that Republicans may be willing to forgive Jeff Sessions for are exactly the same types of things that they weren't willing to forgive Hillary Clinton for when she sat in front of a congressional committee.
Well, I did see, I forget, it might have been a Republican, I'm not going to put a name, but I believe they said, if it was enough to have a special commission about Benghazi, then it should be enough to have a special commission about
And that was
Russia.
from a Republican, we think.
Yeah.
Fact check again.
Fact check again. But we have a comment here from Mel Hatfield, which I think is interesting. And Mel says, how many countries has the CIA involved themselves in foreign elections over the last 4 decades?
So I guess Mel is asking, has the CIA involved themselves in the election of other countries?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, listen.
I mean, that's no secret.
That said, as an American, I have less, I'm not going to lie, I've got less of an issue with our CIA involving itself in another country than I do in some other country involving itself in ours. And yes, that's hypocrisy, but I don't give a damn. Because
America first. Hey, you sound like Trump.
Oh,
hey,
God, let's not.
But we do know that Jeff Sessions is going to make a written statement to the Judiciary Committee, and he put out a statement, Sessions did. He said, this announcement should not be interpreted as confirmation of the existence of any investigation. And
listen, I think that, again, is a touch point for Democrats still. They have said all along that they want a special prosecutor appointed so that there is an investigation. And if Jeff Sessions at this point is not even confirming that there is an investigation of any kind, I think that, and I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I would imagine that a majority of Americans would say, listen, let's get to the bottom of this. And I think that what you said, if it came from a Republican member of Congress or not, that, listen, we need to at least investigate this. And it's this idea of not knowing what happened and not being willing to investigate what happened that is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, okay, here's the one thing that I have to say in Trump's defense, but also my Trump critique, because I think this whole, and Donald Trump said himself on Twitter, this is a witch hunt.
And Kim Studer-Massel also says it's a political witch hunt and nothing more with regards to Jeff Sessions.
Yep, Kim, I think a lot of people would agree with you, but I would take a step back and look at what Donald Trump did to Barack Obama, which was to try to undermine his legitimacy by doing the birth certificate. I mean, that's how he rose to his political fame, was by questioning the legitimacy of President Obama. And I think it's almost kind of like, karma, where this is about questioning the legitimacy of the election. That's really what a lot of Democrats are doing here. And I think they're definitely
I don't know if I agree with that.
I think it's sort of trying to channel the energy of the liberal Democratic
you may be
base,
right there. Yeah.
And to question the free and fair election results of Trump's victory. I think
but-
that's
but there's a-
unfortunate.
there's a
In the same way that I
difference.
was critical of Donald Trump for the birther stuff, I'm critical of Nancy Pelosi with this Russia.
There's a big difference between wanting to question legitimacy, et cetera, and actually doing something about it. I mean, you're right. There is a certain degree of trying to claim that it's not legitimate. There is, in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, almost zero to less than zero chance that anything would be done about changing the results of the election. That's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. But I think that it's listen. We've had comments. We had a comment from Kim. You mentioned Donald Trump saying that it was a political witch hunt. Again, Democrats would argue that the same thing happened to Hillary Clinton, that it was a political witch hunt to talk so much about some of the things that we.
Well, and about the
we spent
emails,
time-
as Melissa Pollock says, speaking of Hillary, what about Mike Pence using a private email server that was hacked when he was governor of Indiana? So that was more news that you missed while you crossed the pond.
What? I
Clay.
did miss that.
You missed that. So while he was governor of Indiana, Vice President now Mike Pence at the time reportedly used an AOL account to have some communications about
who?
official things related to the security of the gates at the governor's mansion, related to Homeland Security responses to terrorist attacks.
Oh God, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like a bad Democrat. I think I've seen this name before, so this person I think is going to be mad at me. I think I probably am bothered less by a governor using a private server than I am by a federal State Department official using a private server. Again, I don't believe that Hillary Clinton did anything deliberately and maliciously wrong in using her private server. I agree with her completely that it was a mistake. She shouldn't have done it. She should have handled it differently. But I definitely don't agree with a State Department official doing it. I don't know. There's something about a governor's office having a private server that bothers me a lot less. I don't feel like you have a lot of state secrets.
Especially, number one, I don't think it was a private server. That's the other thing. It was a private email address, which is, people said that they pointed out correctly that Gmail is actually more secure than what Hillary Clinton, her homebrew server, was incredibly insecure. So I think that's a big difference. I also think that when you look at the emails themselves for the State Department, they were marked classified versus Mike Pence. Maybe, it is a gray area, but I think it's a very, very different type of gradation in terms of the level of emails.
I don't think I'm defending Mike Pence necessarily, because obviously if you are using a private email address, you probably shouldn't be banging the drum about somebody else using a private email address.
Yeah, and I don't know
which he did.
that, I don't think that Pence was like the big force behind it.
He might not have been the big force behind it, but he sure didn't say it was okay. So let's not pretend.
No, that's true.
So I'm not defending Mike Pence's action, but I do think that it certainly if Pence used his AOL account, I think there's certainly bigger fish to fry, and I think everybody looks for every single possible thing they can grab onto, and I might not grab onto that one.
Yeah. Wow.
Listen, I don't grab onto
great.
everything.
No,
I don't
that's
grab onto
good.
everything.
Hey, no, you know what? That's what we try to do at Bold, is like we're trying to disrupt this notion that you have to be in a box and you always have to say one thing, because that's just not true.
No,
So,
you certainly don't, and no one should have any question about the fact that I'll be happy to get pissed off about something if it needs me.
So Clay, let's talk about one more headline before we get to our debate.
Why you want to argue? Don't you?
No. We're our guests who are going to be coming in, but so. The speech. Did you get to see?
I did not see it. I tried my best to stay up, and just couldn't pull it off till 4 or 5 in the morning. But I did read a lot about it, and my understanding was would we use the word behaved?
It was the best speech I have ever heard Donald Trump deliver.
I thought you were going to say ever. Period.
No.
I was going to stand up and walk out, because that's just not true. But okay, so it was the best speech you've heard him given.
I was like, where were you on the campaign? Like, if this is how you were on the campaign, I could have jumped on the Trump train. Now we're all on the Trump train.
He still won, Carrie. I mean, it's worked, whatever he did.
We are all on the Trump train. You might be on the caboose, but we're all on the Trump train right now. And so the thing is, if Trump had been
I don't think I'm on the train. I'm not going to lie.
No, but you're
I'm there. I'm in the country, but I'm not traveling down the same track that he's
your
on.
president.
So
he
may be my president, and I'm willing
#he's
to accept that. But I'm not on the same train that he's on. Sorry.
He's our conductor for all of this whole country. So.
And Obama was your conductor before.
He was, yeah. I had no choice, but he was. And so,
But his speech was more presidential, is what my understanding was.
It was presidential. It was optimistic. It was policy focused.
Do we know who wrote it?
Well, they said it was a combination of people, all Stephen Miller, Bannon, Reince Priebus.
And your headline on
was-
Bold says, with a dash of Obama.
Well, this was from Kathy Aru, who was on our show last week. She wrote out an opinion piece. Kathy is a progressive opinion writer for Bold, a contributor, and she thought that it had some of that eloquence, because we all know that Barack Obama is an amazing elocutioner. Excuse me.
What is that word?
Someone who elocuates.
He's a good speaker.
There we go. He's very well spoken. Excuse me.
So is this
I'm
something that
fluent
we
British
think that
now.
Donald Trump, is it something that we believe President Trump's going to be able to continue, or do we think that this might have just been he was on his meds?
I'm not going to pick up that line. However, I hope that this could be a new chapter, and let's transition to